everyone, Tyler123 here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the 1965 Doctor Who story, The Chase. Now, this is by Terry Nation, the creator of Daleks. It's the third Dalek story, and it of course features William Hartnell as the Doctor, along with Ian, Barbara, and Vicki. So, this takes place directly after the Space Museum, which I reviewed a couple of weeks ago, and at the end of that, we of course had the cliffhanger, which I forgot to talk about in that review, but we had the cliffhanger of the Daleks saying that, well, the travellers have left Zeron, which was the planet that they were on in the Space Museum, and they want to go in time and space. So this story is basically, it's a bit like, in a way, one of Terry Nation's other stories before this, which is The Keys of Marinus, where it's a bit almost individual stories, individual episodes in a way, rather than all being one overarching. It's got an overarching theme, but it's not like a following on serial. It's a bit more broken down into individual episodes. Because with that one, you had each episode collecting a key or whatever. But this one, you have each episode kind of like be a different section of the story where they leave one planet and arrive on another or another time or whatever. And yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. I think here it's a bit less like that. And yeah, overall, I think that aspect of it works okay. But it does kind of mean that the idea could be stretched as long as you want, and it could be shortened. Because you could potentially cut out the 2 middle episodes of this story, and with a couple of changes, you could literally just have them leaving one planet, leaving the planet that they were on the first 2 episodes, and arriving on the planet at the end, Mechanoids. So, yeah. I think it's okay, and the middle 2 episodes aren't the most interesting at all. Now, this story does get quite a bit of hate from some fans. I don't know, some people that would say this is their least favourite Doctor Who story ever. I personally quite like it. I find it quite enjoyable. I mean, as a piece of comedy, it's quite good. Quite fun to watch. I think as a piece of Doctor Who and drama, it could be better, but nevertheless, it's still an enjoyable watch, and ultimately that's what TV should be, enjoyable. So I think it works in that respect. Now, it does arguably do what Strax has done to Sontarans in recent years, and that's this idea that, well, they're kind of made as jokes in this. And the Daleks of this are quite mainly played for their comedic value for once, rather than previous stories where they're actually played as a proper menace. I mean, while adults may have laughed at them in those ones, they were quite scary to children, whereas in this one, I think they would be less scary to children. So, yeah, there's that. Now, I think I'll have a look at the individual episodes. So, you got the first one, which I forgot the title for, and that's basically kind of like it's quite an interesting start to a story, because you've got the first half of the story basically just being life in the TARDIS and life as normal for these people, and you actually get to see them as characters when they're not in danger, and I think that works quite well. Because often in the new series, and later on in the classic series as well, when the storyline got shortened and whatnot, you don't really see the actual lives of these characters, you just see them during the story. So I think having that element here works to the story's advantage quite a lot. So I think now, moving on to the second episode, where we have the cliffhanger of the Dalek, which is kind of like Terry Nation's stock in trade, where you've just got a Dalek as the cliffhanger to episode 1, despite it being revealed before, but still, I think it's still there in this one. So yeah, there's this element to it, which I think. Now, moving on to the next episode, which I've again forgot the title for, which is where you've got a bit more of a thing going on here. I mean, you've got the Daleks now in the story properly, you've got the Iridians and whatnot, and overall it's quite an enjoyable story. So, moving on to the third episode, which I think is called Flight for Eternity, or something along those lines. And this is kind of like the Empire State Building and the Mare Celeste. And yeah, this is kind of like, you remember we saying earlier these episodes could have been cut out and built to, and they aren't the best. I think this one's quite enjoyable. It's quite funny, but Journey into Terror, it baffles me, it honestly does. I mean, you got the second half of the story, which is a bit more Life in the TARDIS again, but not as interesting because you don't have Vicki there. And you kind of like got other stuff going on as well. But here, in this story, I don't like Journey into Terror that much. It's my least favourite episode story from this story. And it honestly doesn't work at all. I think the revelation in the end doesn't make sense, because why would these things attack them? Why are they such an incredible menace to the Daleks? Why can't they be exterminated, etc.? And I think it's a joke that falls flat on its face, quite honestly. So now moving on to the last two episodes. Now this is where it gets quite interesting, because you got the Mechanoids, and unfortunately, because for this story, unfortunately the production values are quite low, because you're nearing the end of the season, so money's running out, and also it's quite an ambitious story in that sense. And yeah, I think because of that, you got more sets need to be built, because you're going to a different place every episode, and it just ends up not working. So yeah, I think that's quite unfortunate for this story. So, because I mean, you can see the studio floor and whatnot, but I think, yeah, overall, and there's even a camera in the background at one point. If you use the camera, which was a mistake, but nevertheless, I think when you get into the last episode, you've got Ian and Barbara's farewell. I think it was quite an effective farewell, really. I mean, it's not as teary the farewell as one in Dalek Invasion Better, which is probably the most upsetting and emotional farewell in Doctor Who, in my opinion. One of most, maybe not the most, but it's very well done. And I think while this one isn't up to that standard, it is still very good, and you could definitely see that the Doctor doesn't really want to say goodbye to Ian and Barbara, because they are his friends at this point, and they've kind of like set him on this path to help the universe and whatnot. And yeah, I think it works quite well, to be honest. And you kind of like got the happy goodbye, which is probably why it's not as sad as Susan's departure, because kind of like you can see that the characters are happy this time, whereas Susan, kind of like you know she'll be happy in the long run, but at first she's quite in a state of shock about it, I guess. So yeah, overall thoughts on this story. Oh, and one more thing before that. The Mechanoids are quite a credible threat. I think I quite enjoy the Mechanoids, like, as a kind of like a foil for the Daleks, I guess. But anyway, back onto what I was saying. Overall, the story is enjoyable. I do like the story. It's a fun story to watch. It's not one that takes too much interest to invest. I do think it could have been. The two middle episodes could easily be cut out. Would I have liked that better? I don't know, really. It could easily be stretched, and the idea is picked up again and reused in the Daleks Master Plan a bit, except, you know, a bit more seriously, if you exclude the seventh part of that Feast of Stephen, which was purely a comedy. But other than that, it was a lot more serious than this. But unfortunately we can't see most of that, because all but 3 episodes lost, and it only takes up about half of it. Then again, the 12-part story, half of the 12-part story is 6 parts. This is 6 parts, so yeah. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so let's rate it at. I'm torn between a 6 and a 7. I think I'll have to go 6.5 for this one. So yeah, that's that. So, oh, and also Stephen in this. I quite like Stephen as companion. I think as an introductory story, it's okay. I more count the Time Meddler as his introduction story. This is just more of a introduce. He's just there in this one. So, yep. So now I'll round it up. Thanks for watching, everyone, and well, I guess I'll see you all next week with another review. Bye, everyone.